Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune. And it's that wonderful time of the year again, when we take a look back on the year in music and pick out the very best to archive and remember. It's time for us to count down the top 50 songs of 2018. So outside of the charts, both critics and audiences seem to be split on 2018 in music. Some loved it, some hated it, and for me personally, it was alright. Oh, there were certainly some incredible albums released this year, but nowhere near as many as, say, 2017. In fact, putting together this list was a lot easier than usual because there just wasn't as much to choose from. Even so, I was excited for this because all these songs are still fantastic. After all, these are not the hits. These are the very best songs out of all the ones I heard off of the albums I talked about in 2018. And yes, that does mean that if a song doesn't appear on this list, it's either because I didn't review the album or the EP it's from, or I just didn't connect to it as much as you did. Either way, feel free to ask about any missing songs in the comments down below. Just know that it's all my personal opinion and taste. So let's kick things off with an artist that a lot more people should be paying attention to. The number 50 spot is always a tough pick with a lot of competition. In the end though, I couldn't deny this song. If I had a soft spot for topics in music, it would be for songs about parenthood, specifically from mothers. And while that may sound corny to a lot of you, there's a darker side to that topic that I enjoy seeing explored just as much. Take this song from the criminally underrated Caroline Rose, where she tells us the story of Jeannie, a girl full of ambition who's ready to take on the world before she's jerked back to reality by the prospect of having a baby enter her life. After all, sometimes the world will just toss a wrench into the works of your routine, and it's not going to wait for you before moving on and past you. It's a bleak song that may even be too candid for some people's tastes, but for me, with its incredibly catchy melody and its take on the matter that few have the balls to talk about, it still hits that sweet spot, albeit in an unconventional way. From a track with a decidedly niche appeal, we dive straight into an awesome rock song, driven by an unforgettable hook and guitar line. Metric have been a little inconsistent with their output the past few years, but this was exactly how to make a return to form, with an interesting theme on top of everything else. See, the lyrics are about the unfair contrast between two characters who now run in the same circles, except that one of them struggled and worked her ass off to get there, while the other had it easy, having been born into it and therefore fits in much more naturally. And the former's frustration builds across the verses before bursting forth beautifully on the hook. Easily one of their best songs and one of the best of the year as a whole.
Shower me with kisses, the way your breath against my skin makes the hairs in the back of my neck stand tall. Feel like I've not felt before now.
You know, this song struck me from the very beginning for just how adorable and beautiful it was, but I'm still surprised how much it snuck up and grew on me. It's a track where Rae Morris is finally alone with the guy she loves and just wants to wind down. No overthinking, no grand gestures, not even much talking. Just showering each other with light kisses and holding each other close. It's a song for those nights where it's just you and the person you love holding each other close, knowing each other better than anyone else does. And with the gorgeous, unassuming instrumentation with that whistling tone that still manages to build a ton of atmosphere, it's a sweet, atmospheric, and intimate song like few we got this year. Beautiful.
I lie for you, baby. Talk for you, baby. Cry for you, baby. But tell me what you've done for me.
Oh yeah, and you thought I loved How Long. But yeah, as amazing as it may be to me, Charlie Puth of all people made this list by basically remaking Somebody That I Used to Know with more of a groove to it, and yes, I do think that's a justified comparison. Two lovers split apart because one feels underappreciated and the other feels like they can't do anything more than they've already done. It's one of those unfortunate situations where everybody shares some blame, but one probably a little bit more than the other. Oh, and it also features some of the best vocal and instrumental production of any pop song this year, resulting in easily the best thing that either of these two have ever done. And while it did take me a while to admit just how much I adored it, by the time December rolled around, I knew that I couldn't, in good conscience, leave it off of this list, because it absolutely deserves to be here.
Don't you remember me? I was
God's favorite customer.
Okay, yeah, it may sound incredibly pretentious to say that I relate to a song with a title like that, but to be fair, I'm fully conscious of that. It doesn't change how much I love this track. It's a mournful, beautifully produced ballad where Josh Tillman is at one of his lowest points after being on such a high. So he turns back to the heavens because now that he's in trouble, he needs help again. After all, he used to be best buds with God, but once he actually became famous, they kind of lost touch. However, this is not a religious song, and it doesn't sound like one. Instead, using it as an allegory for finding yourself at a low point in life after becoming accustomed to having things go your way. It's not elated or hopeful or joyful. It's honestly one of the most melancholic songs released all year. It's the moment on the album where Father John Misty is at the most vulnerable he has ever allowed himself to appear. No longer the untouchable, intelligent figure that so many of his fans look up to, but just a sad, lonely man who needs some company. And I'm not gonna lie, it got to me way more than I could ever have expected. It may be Father John Misty at his lowest point emotionally speaking, but even from there, he manages to reach new heights musically and easily make this list. Fine work as usual, man.
East side, wing strong, when I'm in my zone, smoking on the homegrown, feeling like I'm all alone.
Okay, not every single song that makes this list has to be deep or relatable. Sometimes all you need is a set of kick-ass lyrics, a fantastic beat, a talented MC with a ton of charisma, and one hell of a hook to just kick back and have fun. And thus we get the best solo track that A$AP Rocky has ever dropped, at least for me. The wonderful keening beat, the great and varied flows and bars, and again that incredible hook ensured that I was coming back to this with clockwork regularity from the first time I heard it. It's braggadocious, unapologetically off-kilter, in your face, and I love it. Great job, A$AP. We could really use a lot more of these from you.
Romeo, tell me where you've been. I would be complete if you'd only let me in.
You see, Pop Radio, it's perfectly possible to make a great pop song and still sound fun. At first glance, this jaunty tune may almost seem lightweight, but the more you hear it, the more you notice some key elements. The fast, bass-driven groove, the incredibly sticky hook, the string elements adding some real beauty and surprising class to the instrumentation, and of course, the dark subtext of the lyrics. I mean, while at first glance this may just seem like your typical young love song, notice the title, as well as the fact that the couples that these two are compared to are Adam and Eve and Romeo and Juliet, two couples that famously ended in tragedy. That dark, subtle undertone just adds a flavor to this song, and gives you the impression that things probably aren't going to work out in the end. Either way, it's one of the catchiest songs released this year, and easily an example of what pop music can be when it actually tries. This song may have taken the entire year to grow on me, but after a few months, that fantastic hook just refused to let me go. Thunderous guitars roar across this track, perfectly matching Dan Campbell's howls as he cries out his ode to his sister cities all over the world. All the distant places in foreign countries that he visited far away from his own home, where he always managed to find kind, like-minded people as well as something familiar. It's an anthem to the fact that while we may live in different corners of the world and speak different languages, we're all people at the end of the day, and we all have the capacity to be decent. And in 2018, when we seemed more divided from the people around us than ever, that message of unity rang true and landed the Wonder Years this spot on this list. You know, while last year showcased a lot of songs about fearing our uncertain future, this year had a good few about throwing your hands up in frustration about what a mess we're in now. And this sarcastic punk rock jam is basically the American Idiot for a new generation. Superchunk may have been around a good while and maybe a fair bit older than your average pop punk band letting loose, but they're arguably even more frustrated by our situation because they've seen it all before, and they hate to see the same mistakes be made over and over again. And with one of the catchiest and wry hooks of the year, it's a message that many of us related to pretty strongly in 2018, with a kick-ass song to deliver it.
windows tinted. The windows tinted. I can be flying down that window. With a bad bitch in my whip, I need to.
Oh, this was a collaboration that I didn't know I wanted, but I am so glad to have gotten. Anderson .Paak is one of the best and most unique voices in modern R&B, and Kendrick Lamar is, well, Kendrick Lamar. So having a song where they're both flexing about being so rich and famous that they need tints on their windows to hide them from the outside world is both badass and pretty original. On top of that, they're handed one of the smoothest and slickest instrumentals of the entire year, bringing the listener along for this kick-ass ride. Awesome song, easily the big highlight from Oxnard, and by far one of the most instantly likable songs of 2018. Budlin still should have made the album though.
When you praising the butterfly, don't you ever disrespect the fucking caterpillar. This right here for the number one shit with your number one.
Okay, many of you may think Lucky You was the moment where M peaked in 2018, but for me, his crowning moment was easily on Royce da 5'9's awesome album Book of Ryan. Mostly because Royce is more than a match for him, spitting bars with just as much vigor and vitriol as M, with both of them promising that their style of rap will survive long after the fad that is mumble rap is dead and gone. However, what makes this song stand out to me is the metaphor of the caterpillar. In a genre where your roots and people on the bottom are so important and influential, it's essential to keep our focus there and not let it stray too far. And M and Royce are the perfect MCs to deliver that message with a resounding blow, using some of the best flows and tightest wordplay of any rap song that dropped this year. Fine job, gentlemen, and after this, I wouldn't say no to another Bad Meets Evil album, just saying.
I saw you last night in my dream. There were hydrangeas where your face should be.
Yeah, who knew that one of the Wonder Years' best songs would be a love song? Specifically about Dan Campbell's now wife, Alina, whom he married in 2017. However, what makes this song so beautiful, outside of the gorgeous guitar and string leads and Dan Campbell's much more soft-spoken delivery, are the poetic lyrics where he draws attention to a bunch of examples of love and harmony that he's seen across the world, each of which in some way reminds him of her. Which is yet another reason why he feels that we're not so different from each other, as well as why he'll always feel both welcome and loved wherever he goes. And as it builds to a breathtaking instrumental finish, it's one of the most unexpected and yet brightest sparks that this band had to offer in 2018, and boy was I thankful for it. And from that tranquil bliss, we transition to the utter terror of a man that is locked outside of a house screaming to be let in. It's the terrifying closer that the entire album has been building to, and it does not disappoint in the slightest. It's the safe space that our protagonist has been trying to get to from the very beginning. But once he gets there, the door's shut, there's a padlock on it, and with the howling crescendo of the instrumentation, our frontman slowly descends into madness. And then the album ends, leaving you on an ambiguous note where you don't quite know how to feel. Either way, that desperation and fitting instrumentation had me coming back to this as an easy favorite from the start, as the band delivered everything they had promised me up to that point on the album, and so much more. A lot of music out there asking a question that has plagued many of us for years now. That being, what's the point? After all, everything we do in life, will it amount to anything? I mean, why even bother to begin with? And while this could have so easily been just another song about wallowing in it or just dismissing those feelings, the title track from Metric's last album does something much trickier. It confronts the question head on without trying to provide an answer. Instead, encouraging the listener to keep trying despite the inevitable doubt that they they will feel. After all, both in the relationship displayed on this album as well as every single musical experiment this band has gone for, Emily Haines and the rest of them, they don't know if it's going to work out. And the art of mastering that doubt comes in taking those chances despite the risks and obstacles that may come up along the way. Paired with one of the best guitar progressions that we got this year, this was a song that I both loved, and considering my own decisions that I had to make this year, including managing this channel, is one that I really feel I needed in order to just keep at it.
Steal a car tonight. Commit a felony with me and drive until the sunrise. Let's steal a motherfucking car tonight. Young and alive. So let's commit some crimes.
Oh boy, I can imagine that many of you are going to be pretty surprised to see a band like this on one of these lists. After all, they're a comedy act on YouTube who primarily make jokes about sex. They're not generally the sort of act who get a lot of critical acclaim, but I stand by that their 2018 release is a slice of pop rock gold like few we've heard this year. And what has always characterized their best songs is where they perfectly fuse their comedy with drama. Take this song with its gleaming synths and rock guitars straight out of the 80s, which sketches out the most insane and zany first date that you could possibly imagine, where the couple breaks into museums, do mountains of cocaine, and even murder up to 5 people. After all, more than that would just be unreasonable for a first date. But what makes all of it work so well are the moments of real life and true romance that spring through from time to time. From staring into each other's eyes while holding hands, to the brief moment after the first chorus where he actually realizes he likes her. Which of course makes it all the funnier when, after all they've been through together, she simply decides that she doesn't want a second date. Just goes to show you that a memorable date isn't necessarily the best one. But I can safely assure you guys that by the end of it, you managed to steal my heart at the very least.
Might have made it past the water tower. She loved the milkman.
While the last Pistol Annies album may have been very inconsistent, the highlights were certainly there, and this was by far my favorite of them. In a genre as conservative as country, it may be considered bad taste to talk about your parents in the way these three do, but unlike, say, Mama's Broken Heart, it's clearly concerned about these parents' best interests. It's a song reflecting on how, if their mothers had taken more chances and followed their hearts more, rather than staying so perfect and conservative in their little bubbles as was expected of them, maybe they'd be happier now and find it easier to relate to their daughters. It's admitting that sometimes the older generation could learn a thing or two from their kids, but it's not remotely preachy, instead rooted in a deep sense of sympathy and an understanding that they're not really to blame, just a product of their environment in a time that is long past. Beautifully composed and deeply complex, but these three pull it off effortlessly.
You were a charmer, I was a heartbreak junkie. You were a diamond, I was the heap of fool's gold.
Calcraft is one of the most underrated and slept-on artists out there at the moment, not to mention being unfairly pigeonholed and critiqued by critics on sites like Pitchfork, who just don't really seem to get his true appeal and talent. He's the master of taking rock's slightly misogynistic tendencies towards women and flipping them on their head. Take this incredibly written song, with the organ, organic drums, and touches of horns backing one of the best hooks of this year, as he proceeds to take himself apart as a guy who keeps getting into bad situations but actually does want to change. After all, even though he knows this relationship is ending and he knows this woman can get another guy in no time, he wants to get better. He wants to learn so that he can make a relationship last long enough to turn it into something, instead of always going back to the same types of girls who will inevitably break his heart. It's a song about owning up to your own shortcomings for your own good and actively wanting to get better. And for a lot of us, we could probably learn from his example and at least try to do the same. You know, in the year where everybody was praising women in hip-hop like, say, Cardi B, I feel it's more important than ever to remind people there are plenty of talented women working in hip-hop, and Dessa is one of the best of them. The buzzing, droning synths with the eclectic production backs her up here on one of her best ever tracks, where her fiery delivery and wordplay are in top form, and the technical bars and various flows are a perfect showcase of her boundless talent, all building to one of the best choruses of her entire career. This is how you earn your bragging rights, and if you somehow haven't yet heard this affiliate to the Doomtree camp, this song is a great place to start because it kicks ass. I told you this would make the list back when I reviewed the album, and I meant it. Creepy production adds a ton of atmosphere to the kind of ghost story that we do not get enough of these days. From the point of view of a woman who gets shot in the head only to somehow survive and come back for revenge on the man who took her life. It's a song like few you will ever get in country music, even when it's this progressive. And with the Western and Hispanic influences peppering this wonderful track, along with Lindy's howling and vaudeville-inspired delivery, you have to hope that more people will follow her example just so we can get more of what this amazing song brings to the table.
It won't get better than this. I like the way your brain works. I like the way you try to run with the wolf pack when your legs are tied.
I stand by that the Wombats' last album, Beautiful People Will Ruin Your Life, was a step down from their past couple of releases, as well as a bit of a disappointment overall. However, this throwback to their last album, Glitterbug, was a major exception, mirroring the gorgeous, catchy synth-pop haze that made that album so much fun. In fact, this outdoes the majority of that project, not by replacing the wild energy that made a lot of that album so infectious, but for relaxing it slightly, going for a more laid-back party atmosphere where you're just smiling wryly at all the craziness surrounding you. It's basically Here by Alessia Cara if, rather than judging everybody around you, you just embraced the wild fun, smiled happily, and went along for the ride. As someone who has spent many days being the most sober guy at the party and yet still loving everybody around me, this is a song that I appreciated all year. And my hope is that a bunch of you will now be able to do the same.
I was a band and I would stand and we'd bounce down the road. My boy and his dad in a Pontiac, he'd be radio.
Out of every male country artist still able to notch mainstream success nowadays, I think that Eric Church may just have my favorite voice out of all of them. It's full of personality with a twang that lends itself to storytelling so well. And fittingly, the story on this track is just beautiful, showcasing a young couple who spent their teenage years together listening to the radio and acting young, wild, and free until they eventually give birth to their infant son. A tiny person who may have changed their lives, but whom they're just excited to be able to share their music with in the same way their parents did with them. With the multiple music references that you could just blink and miss, this is a wonderful song displaying the power of music. And just like most of Eric Church's best output, it's a song for music nerds by a music nerd. And as one of those music nerds, I can always appreciate that.
That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you
Okay, there's always that one song released every year that is bound to make almost every single year-end list out there. And in 2018, that song was Make Me Feel. A song so good that it even won over people who weren't that crazy about Dirty Computer. The tight, futuristic, funky, Prince-esque groove, Janelle Monáe's incredible and sexy as hell performance, and one of the best hooks and bridges of the year, made for one of the best pop songs that Janelle has ever released. A song with universal appeal that proved to many exactly why she is the queen of R&B and pop music. But hey, for me and the rest of the fan droids out there, we already knew that, and we're just delighted to embrace it as the incredibly enjoyable tune it was. Not that it's the best entry from Janelle Monáe on this list, but more on that in a bit.
Even if our love can't stay together, I'd rather be king for a day than a fool forever.
I loved this from the start, but I was very surprised how much it stuck with me all year. If you had told me last year that one of my favorite country songs of 2018 would be a song about a guy who is propositioning a girl to a one-night stand, I'm honestly not sure how I would have reacted. But Anderson East did it. He's just that charismatic. On top of sounding great, the backing vocalists, the organ, and especially the horns give this an earnest, cheesy grandiosity to it that I don't know how you could say no to. It's just so disarming. And whether it leads to anything or not, Anderson East just knows that he wants to proposition her. Because as he says, he'd rather take that chance to spend one day with her than pass up the chance altogether and regret it for the rest of his life. Wonderful and surprisingly progressive country song that got its hooks in me early this year and simply refused to ever let go. I went back and forth a lot on whether this or 5 out of 6 was the better song. But at the end of the day, while that song is a wonderful showcase of what an incredible MC Dessa is, it's not her song that got to me the most from that album. A song that paints a mournful dive bar setting where Dessa reflects on her own success, and how nobody can even touch her in terms of pure skill. After all, no one out there can match the amount of work that she puts into her craft, and she is not going to allow herself to be beaten. But with the mournful piano line and the wonderful layered backing vocals, not to mention the drinks that she keeps knocking back in this somber place, it highlights a loneliness to being on top of the game that I don't think has ever been so well expressed in music. It's braggadocious, yet profoundly vulnerable, and doesn't portray her as being any weaker for that vulnerability. And with how gorgeous Dessa's singing sounds on this track, it proves yet again why she is the type of triple threat that we do not get enough of in music. I may not have been crazy about Chime as a whole, but this song is definitely one of her best. A damn beautiful track.
Oh, I know how to levitate up off my feet, and ever since the 7th grade I learned to fire breathing. Though I feed on things that fell, you can learn to levitate with just a little help. Learn to levitate with just a little help.
This is quite possibly the best produced song the 21 Pilots have ever released. Seriously, the warping, atmospheric warble with hints of synths, and the drums that add a ton of groove, not to mention the distorted vocals and touches of bass guitar. And then of course you have Tyler Joseph himself, and if I ever doubted his skill as a rapper, this lends credence to it in the best possible way, as his flows and bars are absolutely impeccable, as in one single verse, he proceeds to take apart the music industry and its consumers in a way that I haven't heard done this effectively since Marianas Trench did it on Masterpiece Theatre. And while that depression is always present and tempting him to take that jump and leave this world, he knows that he still has a lot more to say, and that with a little bit of help from his fellow banditos, he won't fall any further. I do wish that he had gone on for just one more verse, as it's easily the shortest track on Trench, but my god, what an amazing 2.5 minutes it was.